given what I read to you at the beginning of Mass, in founding the Carthusian order, he wasn't doing anything but giving himself wholeheartedly to the Lord. And I'm sure that throughout the centuries, from the 12th century on, that there were probably not thousands of people joining that order, because they knew how strict it was. And in watching that film, Into the Great Silence, which was, I think, 2.5 hours long, without a word of dialogue, but just going through the day of the monks there at the Grand Chartreuse, first monastery that Bruno founded, made it very clear that Christ was the center of all their lives. Oh yes, they had labor in the garden and so forth that they did, but that they gathered for prayer. They even ate in their own particular cells, as they called them. The food was delivered each day by one of the monks, and they, through an opening in the door, they took their meal. And it was only on big occasions, special feasts, that they gathered together for a meal. An extraordinary community, no question about it. And maybe one would first think, well, why would anybody want to join such an austere group who are doing wonderful things by giving all to the Lord? But it's not easy. It's not easy. Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, talks about his own relationship to Jesus. And he says that he counts everything else as loss. So much rubbish that I may gain Christ and be found in him. In that sense, Bruno really was following what St. Paul said in this particular reading especially. Because for Paul, Christ was the center of his whole life. No matter how many difficulties he had, no matter how his preaching was not always accepted, respected, Paul said, for me to live is Christ. And so, St. Bruno, I'm sure, said the same thing. Christ was all in all for him. Even though he was called by the Pope to give some advice and so forth. But he always returned to southern France, to the Grand Chartreuse, and on the monastery at the big mountaintop, there he and his fellow monks gave themselves entirely to Christ. The Gospel is another tough one. Now, St. Luke makes it very clear that Christ must be first in our lives. I'm sure that Jesus would want us to bury one of our parents. I'm sure that the Lord wouldn't mind if you said farewell to your family before you followed him. But St. Luke's purpose in writing this austere gospel was to teach us a lesson by these examples, these stories, birds, wood, that Christ has to come first, no matter what our vocation is. If it's the priesthood, if it's religious life, if it's marriage, or the single life, Christ must come first. And in a world which is not very Christocentric, to say the least, in a world that is distracted by so much quest for fame and fortune, power and pleasure, it's not always easy to put Christ first. It's easy to get distracted. So as we celebrate the memorial of St. Bruno, bring us ever closer to the heart of Christ, like his was, so that in all that we do, in all that we say, Christ may be first and foremost in our lives